Across America, the backlash against artificial intelligence has left the internet and landed in town halls, courtrooms, and kitchen faucets. Tonight, a secretive company wants to drop a $1.6 billion data center onto the farmland of one small Wisconsin city, and the residents are fighting back. From federal noise lawsuits to a grid operator that can now switch data centers off during a heat wave, here is where the AI buildout collides with the people living beside it. In Menomonie, Wisconsin, a rural city of about 16,000 people, residents have spent months demanding answers about a data center that arrived cloaked in secrecy. The proposal would cover roughly 320 acres of farmland, carry a price tag near $1.6 billion, and, until recently, the developer's identity was hidden behind a shell company. After a fierce public outcry over the secrecy, the noise, and the water use, city leaders were forced to act. On the 3rd, the mayor stood before the council and read a brand new draft zoning ordinance aloud, line by line, to set the first real rules for data centers in the city. Officials stress no vote was taken. This scene is playing out nationwide. In the first quarter alone, community opposition delayed or blocked 75 projects worth $130 billion. And that grassroots anger is increasingly ending up in court. A new legal front has opened against the data center industry, and this time the weapon is an old one. The nuisance lawsuit, experienced mass-tort law firms, the same players behind major environmental class actions, have begun recruiting neighbors and suing operators over the relentless, low-frequency hum their cooling systems and backup generators produce around the clock. In one closely watched case, 2 residents filed a federal class action against DataOne USA over a facility in Cumberland County, describing a constant droning noise they say has made their homes unlivable. Another suit in Mississippi pairs nuisance and negligence claims with alleged violations of environmental statutes. Attorneys openly describe it as a coordinated strategy, a playbook borrowed from past mass-tort campaigns against polluters. For homeowners who feel local boards ignored them, the courtroom has become the last resort. Behind many of these complaints lies a single, enormous strain: the electrical grid. That strain has now grown so severe that the nation's largest grid operator has been handed the power to pull the plug. In late July, the Department of Energy authorized PJM interconnection, which serves 65 million people across 13 states, to curtail data centers and other large loads during grid emergencies. Any facility drawing at least 50 megawatts can be ordered to switch to its own backup generators within 15 minutes of an emergency signal. The trigger was a brutal heat wave that pushed demand toward an all-time record of roughly 166,000 megawatts. Hospitals, water treatment plants, and air traffic control towers are exempt from the cuts. PJM says its power supply costs have jumped more than 60%, driven largely by data center demand, and residential customers are footing much of that bill. But the grid is only half the story. Water tells the other half. While data centers strain the grid, they are also quietly draining America's water. New analysis shows the water used to cool AI servers surpassed 264 billion gallons in 2025, enough to supply entire cities, even as a punishing drought gripped nearly 2/3 of the country. The collision is not accidental. Researchers found that of the 809 large data centers now planned across the United States, roughly 2 out of every 3 are slated for regions that have already spent the past year in drought. A single large facility can swallow up to 5 million gallons a day, the equivalent of a town of tens of thousands of people. As reservoirs shrink and utilities plead with residents to conserve, Communities are asking why so much scarce water is being promised to server farms. That mounting pressure is pushing lawmakers to finally act. And one state has gone further than any other. Maine has enacted the nation's first statewide moratorium on large data centers. A first in the country law that halts new facilities drawing more than 20 megawatts until November of 2027. The measure, known as LD 307, cleared the legislature this spring after a final Senate vote, and reflects a rare bipartisan alarm over rising electricity rates and water use. Rather than simply banning construction, the law also creates a new data center coordination council, tasked with protecting ratepayers, safeguarding grid reliability, minimizing environmental harm, and steering any future development toward responsible sites. Supporters call it a deliberate pause before a wave of subsidies in construction arrives. Critics call it an overreach that will chase investment to friendlier states. Either way, other legislatures are watching closely. Yet even with the brakes on, the demand driving all of this keeps climbing. To understand why this fight has become so intense, look at the raw numbers behind the AI boom. In just 3 years, United States data center electricity demand has nearly doubled, leaping from around 23 gigawatts in 2023 to roughly 42 gigawatts. Today, more than 4,500 facilities are already running, with over 700 more under construction across 38 states. But it is not only the size that alarms engineers. It is the behavior. This spring, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation issued a rare, highest urgency alert after blocks of data center demand exceeding 1,000 megawatts abruptly dropped offline within seconds during minor grid disturbances. Loads that massive vanishing in an instant can whipsaw voltage and destabilize the entire system. In Virginia, data centers already consume more than 1 in every 4 kilowatt-hours the state uses. And yet, despite every warning, construction is pressing forward at a record pace. Nowhere is that clearer than in the high desert of central Utah. In rural Millard County, developer Jewel Capital Partners has broken ground on what it calls one of the nation's most advanced data center campuses, an artificial intelligence complex sprawling across roughly 4,000 acres. County commissioners approved the multi-billion-dollar project after months of debate, including a contested companion solar farm that drew its own public opposition. Developers say the site's high elevation gives it optimal cooling efficiency, and they are racing to begin producing power on site by the end of this year. An admittedly ambitious timeline, backers promise high-paying jobs and a wave of investment for a region that has long felt overlooked by the state's economy. To critics, it is one more giant landing in a place with little power to say no. And the money behind construction on this scale is genuinely staggering. Consider the single largest deal the industry has ever seen. A consortium including MGX, Global Infrastructure Partners, Microsoft, Elon Musk's xAI, NVIDIA, BlackRock, and the sovereign wealth funds of Singapore and Kuwait has agreed to acquire aligned data centers for roughly $40 billion, more than double the previous record for a data center transaction. It is a vivid snapshot of how the world's most powerful companies and governments are pouring capital into the physical backbone of artificial intelligence. Analysts now expect total data center investment to reach around $650 billion this year alone, with private equity money flooding in at a 5-year high. Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, and Apple together plan to spend hundreds of billions more. From a Wisconsin farm field to a Utah desert, the question echoing across the country is no longer whether this buildout can be stopped, but who will ultimately pay for it. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. It helps us cover more of these stories.